What's going on, guys? So in front of me, you are looking at a interesting array of welding equipment and accessories. And this is because I am not a welder. I have never been a welder. I have dabbled in some really short attempts to weld to no avail. It basically was me just trying to weld something because I had a welder nearby, and I failed dramatically because I'm not a welder. So we're going to talk about my goal to become proficient at welding, the timeline I plan on doing it in, and some of the things that I've purchased over the last several months to try to help me get there. Hang tight, I'll be right back. So you may have seen the video where a good friend of mine welded this really cool bucket. We call it the Raptor Claw for our John Deere 50G mini excavator. He basically took a drawing I had and turned it into reality. And this thing has been an absolute beast, tearing through anything we've needed. And it's only 4 inches wide, so it gives us a heck of a lot of capability whenever we're trying to run pipe or wire or anything underground. So yeah, this is one of the reasons I want to learn how to weld. And next to it we have another bucket with a hook on the back, and thankfully that same welder was able to come over and weld the hook on the back of our bucket for us, which again is another reason why I want to learn how to weld. As a matter of fact, I can go around our property and find so many projects that welding would have come in really handy for me, but thankfully I know a welder and he was able to complete projects for me, such as turning this debris fork into an attachment for my John Deere mini excavator, or adding hooks to the top of my tractor bucket, or building me in an entire bucket out of pretty much a single 4x8 sheet of 3/16 inch material. But probably and most importantly, the reason why I want to learn how to weld is because there are so many projects related to RVs that could use welding, or even welding improvements, or even additions that would make things so much easier and stronger if you knew how to weld, such as our Brookstone. So if you go back that far in the channel, which is now like 4.5 years, you'll see where we added a really cool bumper extension. We added the tailgate system, put some rollers on the back, we reinforced the suspension, and did a whole variety of other things with a welder who knew how to do welding. And with such a heavy focus on welding quality when it comes to building RVs and the frames and the structure, you know, knowing how to weld isn't really a bad skill to have, especially if you want to tackle some interesting projects like maybe how to reinforce sections of a frame, or add cross bracing, or add other types of structural components that can make your RV last longer. So again, welding is an important skill and one that I currently don't possess. Okay, so admittedly, it's a little embarrassing to have to say, I need help welding something, to call someone to weld something, when it's a skill that a lot of people could probably learn if they tried to do it themselves. Now, this is one of those areas that you do have to be careful. You have to understand what you're buying and if it's even capable of doing what you want it to do. And like just about anything, if you buy the wrong equipment for the job you're trying to accomplish, you're likely to hurt yourself, hurt the equipment, or damage both, and possibly injure other people. So I want to be sure that I'm learning the right way and I'm using the right resources. So I want to be sure that I'm doing it right. And in front of me is a mixture of doing it wrong. Well, kind of. So I went out again over the last couple of months and I decided, actually it's probably been more like 5 or 6 months, and decided I was going to buy some really low-cost equipment that might teach me the fundamentals of welding, the different types of welding, and which one would be more beneficial for the applications I would need. Mainly welding materials that would probably be at minimum 3/16 of an inch all the way up to maybe 1/2 inch thick steel. I don't know of any other applications where I'm going to go way beyond that, but I think if you understand the fundamentals of welding, you probably can easily learn how to weld larger, thicker items when you need to. That said, the items I purchased in front of me are super low cost items. I paid for this stuff. None of this stuff was sponsored. It was basically one of those times where you're kind of bored at home and you're like, I'm going to search Amazon, and you come across some really cool stuff. This one right here was this handheld welding machine, which I think most of the time they're handheld, but this one's kind of like an all-in-one unit, really designed for light applications. And this was one of my first dabbles in messing around with welding. I was trying to weld something a little too thin and I pretty much burned right through it. I got this Arc Captain, and officially this is called the Arc Captain 130 amp MIG welder. So it's a 110 volt compatible welding machine. Basically, I can plug this into a wall outlet as long as I'm not overloading the outlet. It's a MIG, TIG, and stick welder, basically a 3-in-1 machine machine. This is a pretty cool system. They call it an inverter portable gasless welder, and quite frankly, it works okay if I want to learn how to weld something small. And I was actually dabbling around and was able to weld my first piece of steel together. So this is probably the perfect example of something that's horribly been welded. Now, I wasn't attempting to lay them both flat because I needed to get the clamps onto the other end, so it was elevated up a little bit like this. And I made my first pass on one side, ground it down, and then my second pass on the other side and also ground it down. It looks a lot better ground down than it looked whenever it was all sloppy and nasty looking. So again, I'm trying to pick up this skill. I'm going to have my buddy who is an advanced welding expert. He is a welding inspector. He builds barbecue pits. He builds all sorts of stuff. And you've seen him on my channel quite often making me all sorts of cool stuff. And again, I'm going to be honest, it's a little embarrassing to admit that I haven't attempted this sooner, because with all the projects that I have, sometimes you just don't want to have to call a welder. Sometimes you just don't want to have to reach out to someone and say, can you do this for me? You want to do it yourself, and you want to have the skills to do it. So the equipment here is certainly not what I would consider to be good equipment. This is pretty much the stuff that you get because you're considering welding, but you're not too serious about it and you don't want to spend too much money. So that's the reason why I got this stuff. I bought this apron, which is really nice. It's made by Duratech. It's a really thick leather apron. I bought these gloves, which are made by Yes Welder. These are really, really thick, even though this thing came with some really, really cheap gloves that I probably wouldn't trust. But I bought these gloves, and I also bought this really cool, I guess, Thulium, I don't know what it's called, but it's basically a self-dimming helmet, and it was relatively inexpensive, but it had really, really good reviews. All in all, with everything here, I probably spent about $200. I did not spend much money, and this is what I'm going to use to kind of work on small stuff to get myself more introduced to welding. MIG welding is probably what I gravitate to the most. I'll probably try to do a little bit of stick and a little bit of TIG welding if I have the opportunity to do it. And then I am going to get a bigger machine. And one of the reasons why I want some of this equipment out here in the shop, and not this equipment, but the bigger stuff, is mainly because if you have someone who knows how to weld and they don't have to bring all their equipment over here to do it, it makes it a lot easier to get them to come over and help you weld. It makes it a lot easier for them to come over and help teach you, so they don't have to drag their own stuff around and you don't have to go over to their place to do it, and you can actually do it on projects that you're working on and not have to worry too much. So that is my goal now, and I will absolutely share my progress, what I'm doing, best practices for those of you who are also looking at getting into this. You know, I have to admit, I threw this thing on the ground several times after it cooled down. Some people probably are familiar with welding, but for those of you who are not, if you weld something thick like this, it's going to stay hot for a very, very long time, and it's going to stay so hot after you're done welding it that it'll sizzle water off of it very, very quickly. It is that hot. You are dealing with a lot of electricity and a lot of heat when you're welding, so you always want to understand that. Another reason why those thick gloves also come in handy. But that said, yeah, I was able to dabble around with something like that. I realized that even though this is a really, really horrible weld, I threw it on the ground multiple times and it didn't split apart. I wasn't able to break it apart. I might try to drive over it to see if I can. I don't know how I would consider this from a weld penetration perspective, but it's probably pretty terrible. That said, I can absolutely admit that this is an area that I've been wanting to know more about. I've been wanting to learn myself, and now's the time to actually do it, because I have so many projects that are just so difficult to schedule with someone who knows how to do this that I really just need to figure out how to do it myself. So I'm going to learn this process. Hopefully you enjoy it yourself, and I'll be making videos as I learn, because I want you all to see the process from someone who has absolutely zero welding experience to someone who can be moderately proficient, at least enough to pass a welding inspector's inspection. That's my goal. If I can do consistent welds to where a welding inspector might say, you know what, it looks ugly, but it passes, that's good enough for me, at least for now. Then I'll start working on the cosmetic side of it to make them look prettier. That said, hope you enjoyed this video. Now's a great time to subscribe to the channel. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoy this journey, because I am about to kick off my series on welding. Guys, if you haven't had a chance to take a moment, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up. We'll talk to you again real soon.